Welcome to the Intelligence Briefing Live What's the Buzz, where leaders and hands-on experts share how they have turned hype into outcome. Today we'll talk about automating your document processing with LLMs. And who better to talk about it than somebody who's actually working on that? Petr Baudis. Hey Peter, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, Andres.
Great. Hey, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. My name is Petr Baudis. I'm a co-founder and CTO of Rossum. I'm a programmer by heart, I would say. I've started programming when I was like 10 or something. I contributed to many open source projects. I worked on many AI projects as well as early as 2005-ish. I, for example, collaborated on in the area of computer Go on some programs, which then DeepMind, when building AlphaGo, used as their main reference. But for the past 8 years, I'm building Rossum. So the R&D department and the product strategy belongs on my side. And at Rossum, what we do is we have this vision that when you as a company are processing incoming documents, it shouldn't be open spaces full of people sitting there 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, just typing over some pieces of information from pieces of paper to some computer forms. This should be automated. So our vision is that one person processes 1 million incoming document-based transactions per year in such a company. Right now, it's like tens of thousands, maybe low tens of thousands typically. So it's a pretty ambitious vision. And we use advanced AI. We are a deep tech company, and we are focusing on managing this process end to end. So not just capturing data from documents, but everything from receiving the document to the company through things like approval flows, GL coding, etc., all the way to getting the data in great quality to your SAP, Oracle, or whatever other system there is, even automatically rejecting the document and sending an email back to the sender if something is wrong with it.
Awesome. That sounds really exciting. And I remember I've seen you already a couple of years ago when you were just starting out, and it was super impressive to see what you guys are building. So also thank you for sponsoring today's episode and bring this information to many more people. Excited to have you on the show, like I said. And folks, for those of you in the audience, if you're just joining the stream, drop a comment in the chat where you're joining us from. I'm always curious to see how global our audience is. And also don't forget to pick up your copy of the AI Leadership Handbook so you can learn how you can successfully run AI projects in your business. Now, Peter, with that out of the way, should we play a little game to kick things off?
All right, bring it on.
Okay, so let's see. This one is called In Your Own Words. And when I hit the buzzer, the wheels will start spinning. When they stop, you'll see a sentence, and I'd like you to answer with the first thing that comes to mind and why, in your own words. To make it a little more interesting, you only have 60 seconds for your answer. Are you ready for What's the Buzz?
Let's go.
Okay, so here we go. And if you follow us live, please put your answer in the chat too. So if AI were a movie, what would it be? 60 seconds on the clock. Go.
All right, a movie. So honestly, the first movie that came to my mind is Terminator, but that's so cliche, and I don't really believe in it. But I think Shrek is a great analogy, actually, because the first scene that comes on mind from Shrek is the scene where one of the characters keeps asking, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" And the other one says, "No, stop asking, please." But on the other hand, they still keep making progress to their destination. So I think AI is a lot like this. It's been overhyped a lot, and now I think many people in the audience have to be asking, "Are we there yet?" Finally, and I'm gonna say, no, not quite yet. There is still a lot of hype in the field, but there is also a lot of amazing progress, and it just needs a bit of a discerning person to just pick up what are the right pieces there.
Wonderful, thank you. See, I was going to ask, are we there yet? But I'm excited for our conversation and seeing where that leads us, especially in the realm of processing your documents with LLMs. So thank you for that awesome answer. Yeah.
Hopefully to a happy ending.
Yeah. Now, I've been seeing so much about digital transformation and digitization for pretty much the last 10 years. And still it baffles me that even the largest organization rely on paper-based processes. I was working with a number of Fortune 500s a couple of years ago, and it just blew my mind. I thought everything is automated, everything is digital, everything, doesn't even come in a PDF or in some kind of a scanned document, but purchase orders, invoices, bills of lading, you name it. And now I feel that the good thing is that there's been even more automation over the years with machine learning, for example, and other techniques in OCR. But now it comes down to the old question, right? How much does this actually cost me if I want to match my or extract information from my documents, and how much can I save? So I remember doing some calculations many years ago. Time spent per document multiplied by the number of documents per year. This is what your cost is. This is what your spend is if you do this with a software solution. But it's rarely that simple, right? So I'm curious, what are you seeing? If you're a leader, you're thinking about how can I automate my document processing? Where should you start? What's the calculation you should be doing?
Right. So I think it's most important to think about what do you actually want to achieve, and try to phrase that in a bit of more concrete terms. So from my perspective, my advice would be to start with your use case. And as the machine learning practitioners, they always think about the input and output, right? So yeah, I want to put some input in, and this is the kind of output I expect. And pretty often I actually hear people that don't have a clear idea what they want to get out from the system, right? They just want to get some extra insights, etc. And that might be fine for some cases, but if you are really optimizing some business process, you need to think, okay, what's my input like? What's the type of the data that I'm processing? Is it gonna be invoices, or is it gonna be, for example, construction charts? You will want a very different system with pretty different cost and ROI equations. Also, depending on what the use case is. Another thing is what's the volume of my data? You might have hundreds of documents per month, super complex, long documents with complex tables, maybe logistics or material analysis or use cases like this. Or you might be talking about millions of purchase orders or invoices a month. And again, then the cost equation will be different. You will be, in the first case, maybe you have just one or two people processing this. In the other case, you probably have a big team of people processing it, but maybe they are all in the same place, or maybe each of them is sitting in a different office, working in a different region, maybe entering the information to a different downstream system, right? So that's one part of it, is this use case. What's the type of data, the volume of data? What do you want to get out? Do you want to get an SAP business report out, or something else maybe? Then I think it's good to think a little wider and think, okay, what's your actual business objective? And by that, I mean that, okay, you want to capture some data from some documents maybe, or intelligently process documents in general, but probably there is an overall business process that you want to automate, right? And then it's worth starting from the big picture, from this whole business process. Is it an order to cash or something like that? Then you want to think about, okay, what's the biggest piece of it I actually can automate? Because maybe you can automate way more than just the document data capture. The more you automate, the longer part of the process that you automate, usually that means that you are going to use some pretty integrated platform to run this process. The more integration there is, the tighter product you use that covers a bigger piece of the process, the more benefits you usually get. Because you don't need to switch between systems, you need to think less about integrations, and also if those products, if they advertise automation, the more signals, the more feedback from user usage they get, the higher automation they can achieve, right? And then the last piece is, do you want everything at once, or are you willing to think about some sort of roadmap? Maybe at the beginning, I don't need full automation. I just want to save 70% of my time, or time of my team, but I'm still okay with people checking those documents at the beginning. Maybe at the beginning, I don't need a fully fine-tuned integration. I am okay with some extra manual steps during the integration until I work out all the details, right? If you are willing to think in a bit of an agile way like this, you probably can get a better ROI and also de-risk your project, because already you can start getting some benefits early. And meanwhile, of course, you still should aim high from my perspective.
No, that's a great way to frame it, right? Think in first of all business terms, think in manageable chunks of what you want to go after. And maybe if I can pick up the question from Crispin here in the chat. And I think it's great with your technical background, right? I remember when I worked with large organizations, again, 6-7 years ago, we would ask them for tens of thousands of documents, and they had to be annotated, and where's the bounding box, and what is this field, and lots of additional data or ground truth to test how does our model actually work. And it was a big leap to go from text to tables and to PDFs and tables in PDFs. So Crispin here is asking, what happens when pre-processing fails on a PDF or on a PowerPoint, or when it's complex with tables, images, or potentially videos? How do you handle that when it comes to document processing and working with AI on that unstructured data?
Sure. So first, you want to design your process and use appropriate tooling so that you don't lose those documents altogether, right? At the worst case, you want to do the same thing as you would do if you were just doing this manually. And maybe, yeah, sometimes you just get a PDF that you just cannot open on your computer at all. And then what you do, you just write back to the sender, this isn't working for me. You need to resend it. I cannot process it, something like that, right? And then you just figure it out. And if you actually, if you are thinking about an IDP solution like Rossum that has this end-to-end integration, this platform can do things like this automatically on your behalf if it cannot open those documents. And then you need to think about the quantitative aspect. Is it just like one document in 10,000? Is it just going to happen to me once a week that something like this happens? In that case, just an escalation to a human person can be totally fine, right? If it's just this small fraction. What you want is a system or a platform that has this built in and that has a user-friendly process for it, so that it generates minimum extra hassle to have a human take a look at it and process it manually if need be. If it's just a small fraction of those documents, then that can be totally fine answer, and probably much cheaper than trying to figure out, okay, how do I tweak the process so that I get 100% literal automation?
Wonderful. I love that answer. Very practical. Now, we've been talking about this for quite a bit before we set up today's episode and topic. And, you know, obviously anybody following the tech field for the last 2 years, there's no way around LLMs, there's no way around generative AI, and there's an abundance of these models in the market. And it feels like every week there's some kind of enhancement or some new one coming out. Vendors are, you know, outbidding themselves in the capabilities that they ship, that they look into, that they deliver. How would you say should AI leaders use LLMs and bring them to the business? How should they make that tangible?
So first, I think each AI leader should have a lot of personal experience just using LLMs day to day to get a good feel what are their strong points and what are their weak points, because there is plenty of both, right? So if you are an AI leader or innovation leader, or even just like upper management in an enterprise company, and you don't use LLMs, at least sometimes, even for just personal purposes to help you write personal documents or whatever, doesn't need to be in the compliance of enterprise context, right? But you should try using those LLMs and just see what comes out. You should be willing to experiment with them a little, and I think that's super important to develop this intuition about what's the current state of AI, because in some cases, it will really amaze you and blow your mind. In other cases, it will make your head ache because it will mislead you with some hallucinations. That's all part of the story, right? But in order to get value from those LLMs, you need to understand their weaknesses as well as their strengths. So that's one part of this. Then when it comes to actually using LLMs in real world business processes within your company, then one thing that's the most important one to distinguish. It's distinguish between a fancy demo and some tool that you can use reliably and that can reliably process 98% or 99% or 99.9% of your documents, right? Of course, if you copy paste a purchase order to ChatGPT and you start talking about it, it will already kind of pick up a lot of the information, etc. But then, if it's a purchase order with 3 pages of line items, and you start asking about specific columns, it might not do so well anymore, right? So it's about this reliability aspect that needs to be really thought out, and you want to find a platform that has a really good story around how can they achieve this reliability. Then another thing there is regarding adaptability, because the thing is, unless you are just a small company using totally standardized process around some existing off-the-shelf accounting software, etc., you probably have some pretty specific process. And I think this is super underrated aspect of LLMs. How do you make them adapt to your concrete process? Of course, you can prompt them in a custom way, etc. But that's actually super laborious. If you have a bit of an elaborate process, you are maybe a little bigger company, and you actually want a system that just watches over your shoulder as you execute the process yourself and learns from it on the fly. Again, an example at what we do at Rossum is we have this instant learning system where you just put in a document, you mark something on the document, whatever you need. Of course, if it's just like an invoice, it will already pick up a lot of things on its own. But then the second document you send in, even if you put something totally specific, with a very high chance it's already picking up the information from this document just based on what you showed it. You don't want a system that you manually set up where you do some AI engine management and run some trainings manually, or which you need to prompt up explicitly. You want something that just adapts on the fly, and those solutions are on the market. So you really want that. And ultimately, though, there are risks and there are weaknesses. So you want a system that handles those well. So you need a system that has a good answer for what do you do in case of hallucinations? How do you defend against prompt injection, etc. It's pretty easy to find out those risks. You just Google around, and again, pick a vendor that has a solid solution. ChatGPT wrapped in a thin connector probably will not be the answer.
Several great points that you made, and they resonate deeply with me. So one, I remember, again, a couple of years ago, when I was working with large organizations on things like document processing, we asked for sample data. We got, hundreds of invoice or hundreds of PDFs, and it wasn't always one invoice in one document. Sometimes it was 2 or 3 or 4 in one document that that a customer's vendor has sent them. I think they're splitting the document, finding out where, what belongs to one document, what's the next one, what's on page 1, what's on page 3. I remember it was a very complex task for a software system, even in machine learning or now LLM-based system, to figure out. So yes, there are standard off-the-shelf things that you can use for free or for $20 per user per month. But I think you make an excellent point that as with standard software in general, if there's somebody that has already thought this through for you, there's a big benefit and a big value to do that. Which kind of leads me to that next point of enterprise organizations or IT landscapes are heterogeneous. Right? Vendors would love it to be wall-to-wall one company, especially the bigger their footprint is. But the reality is that there's an HR system, there's a customer experience system, there's a finance system, there's an HR system, supply chain system, and so on. And usually they're from many, many different vendors. Makes sense, right? You with the cloud, you had a lot of the individual buying centers going and buying the best of breed solutions there. But I feel they're pretty much left with 2 choices, right? Either you use each individual vendor's built-in OCR or document processing features, and they will probably deliver different results, or you quickly need to integrate your own solution with all of these individual systems. And that can very well mean a lot more cost, a lot more time that you need to spend than you initially thought. And I'm curious, what are you seeing when it comes to integration? What do some of your customers do, for example?
Yeah, The story can be even wilder, because a lot of those biggest enterprises, how they grow is essentially mainly through acquisition. And when they do an acquisition of another company, that company's SAP instance can survive for many years within the company. So just like each business unit can have their own Oracle, and of course there is like plenty of IT departments just like working on integrating it and ideally normalizing everything. But those projects usually looks like so much that if you have a shared service center within a large enterprise, it usually just has to deal with an insane amount of systems. And from our perspective at Rossum, we call this the multinational the multinational enterprise problem, or even the many national enterprise problem, because if you look at an average Fortune 500 enterprise, they operate in 70 plus countries, and they have their supply chain in different countries than where they have their consumers, right, etc. So you need a system that can deal with wide variety of regions and file formats that come with those regions, different standards. If you, for example, throw in invoicing into the mix, that's really totally wild, because each country does that totally differently, even within areas like EU, right? And then, of course, plenty of different downstream ERP systems. So you need to, if you want to standardize, on kind of shared piece of infrastructure that can handle all those situations and connect to all those different systems. And the big advantage of standardizing like this is you can manage your IT costs much better. And for me, that's kind of part of this recent story, which is really important for me. That's kind of pushing back against the status quo of working around a legacy IT, because it feels to me that the world of the ERP systems is switched into a very different gear, much slower gear in terms of change and adaptation and adopting best practices than the world of innovative pieces of enterprise software like AI-based IDP solutions. So at Rossum, we actually gave this a lot of thought, and very recently we had a big launch around formula fields for admins, which is essentially a way to customize your business transformations without knowing programming, and with using LLMs with just text-based input. It is kind of pretty impressive ability. At least our customers say so when we show it to them and when they use it to onboard their cases. So from this perspective, eventually you want also to think though about gradual rollouts. So when you think about this shared piece of infrastructure for your many national enterprise, it's always best to just pilot it in a single country, then add extra 3, and then go global, so that you really gain this trust, because it's not worth the risk to just jump directly into a global rollout.
Now, I'm curious. We've talked quite a bit about extracting information from documents, doing that with machine learning and OCR. Now LLMs, certainly LLMs have been at the forefront of news and everything for quite some time. And a lot of times I see this being about text. And obviously with invoices, sales documents, bills of lading, pretty much any document, we do have a lot of text. What are some of the key benefits you would say that adding LLMs to a document processing workflow or solution has brought in your case? What hasn't been possible before that's possible now?
Sure. So from my perspective, when we have our POCs with our clients, etc., what didn't change is we usually were the top solution in terms of the accuracy and automation potential before. We still are, but it just enables us to keep increasing the accuracy without increasing the machine learning model complexity. So one big thing is large language models are a bit of a unifying factor that lets you just outload a lot of the complexity to this large language model. So our TLLM, the transactional large language model that we developed here in Rossum, it substitutes about 10 different machine learning models that we have used before. So the platform gets much simpler, and that lets us focus into just increasing the raw accuracy, the automation, the speed of learning of the system, the adaptation process, without getting distracted by all the complexity and making sure we support OCR in this language and that language, etc. We can just kind of all solve this in a single place. So I think that's a huge advantage. And that also gives those LLM-based systems a lot more versatility than has been traditional for IDP systems before. But I think the other aspect is really, I think LLMs in the next 5 years will be a huge game changer in how enterprise IT infrastructure gets integrated together, because you will empower non-programmers a lot more. So the process domain experts, etc., they will be able to do a lot more without relying on developers, and that will speed up the change in the enterprise IT ecosystem tremendously.
I love that, and I'm fully with you that there's so much more change coming in many good ways, more than we can even comprehend right now. And just seeing, what is already possible today and where things are going, to me, is super exciting because then how should you plan your vision? How should you think about these things before they become reality, so you're ready when they do? But also if I look at my Twitter feed, for example, AGI, artificial general intelligence, is near. It's almost here, especially if you believe the ones of OpenAI and several other AI labs. What are you seeing? What's your perspective on this? Are we going to have AGI next year?
Probably not next year, even though it's always difficult to predict, right? The most difficult thing there is defining what AGI is and agreeing with each other on that, because we just keep shifting goalposts. And if we showed someone from a decade ago what current GPT can do, they would totally say that's totally AGI. We see all the weaknesses still, so we think, okay, we need to go a little further, right? So the goalposts keep shifting a bit. I think it's gonna take a little more, but I am more in the camp of people who are very optimistic about the speed of AI development overall. And I think AGI is more of this decade thing yet, and not the next decade. But I also think that AGI cannot be overrated too much, because at the very beginning it's going to be very resource intensive, and it's not that once we get AGI with snap of the finger, the world will totally change. I think the world is a lot slower to change than people, especially the deep tech people in AI, think. And still, even if there are no new big inventions beyond the current GPT-4 and Claude Sonnet, etc., it would still, in the next 10 years, it would have plenty of world-changing potential. So I think it's gonna still take some time, but I'm pretty optimistic about AGI overall. And from my perspective, the angle then is thinking again in your kind of enterprise IT ecosystem story. How do you pick solutions that can leverage this, where AGI can be plugged, also solutions that can be used by AGI engines from the future, etc. Because it's not that AGI would obsolete all the internet infrastructure and all the enterprise infrastructure, right? AGI will not obsolete SAP. Even if you have the whole company built around AGI agents, it will still need SAP to keep their records. And it might still want to use a solution like Rossum rather than just doing everything themselves, because it's going to be a lot more robust and it's going to be a lot cheaper. The intelligence will still cost a lot more. The generalized one will cost a lot more than a specialized tool.
Awesome. Look, I see we're getting close to the end of the show, and I was wondering if you can summarize the key 3 takeaways for our audience today. Again, thanks for sponsoring today's episode, and I'm super excited to see what you're already doing today with large language models and what that path is as we increase autonomy and automation. So maybe just the 3 key takeaways before we wrap up.
Okay, 3 key takeaways. We ended up the last question on a bit of a sci-fi note, I guess, but let's go back to the reality. Let's go back to the today, right? So I think when you are on the market looking at LLM tools that can help you, I would say look at a tool that has a great reliability story, so that it cannot be thwarted by just like low inconsistent performance or prompt injections and hallucinations, etc. Look for a tool that has great adaptability stories, so that it really adapts on the fly to your specific requirements without you spending very long onboarding times or a huge amount of IT resources on it. And look for a tool that can be integrated easily, that has a good story around how you can spend minimum possible IT resources to connect it to all your systems that you need, because you want a tool that's end-to-end, that doesn't just you don't actually want a tool, you want a platform where the documents live, which connects to all the systems and solves your business process end-to-end.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Petr. Thank you for joining us today and for sharing your experience with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. And thanks for those of you in the audience for joining us, and see you next time for another round of the Intelligence Briefing Live. What's the Buzz? Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.